Alright guys, today we're going to look at the CRUD functionality, and if you've gone in the user model lately, you'll see that we have something very similar to it. CRUD is basically create, rename, update, delete. You see in our user model we have a get, an insert, an update, and a delete, and these are super simple. But what we want to do is make a model that would be flexible for any class we want to use. So here's what we'll do. We'll create a new model. So I'll make a new PHP file. I'll call this CRUD model. And I'll do this and we'll say class CRUD. I'll do it all uppercase. Model extends CI model. Okay. And what we need to do is a public function construct. And when we create the CRUD model, we need it to create the CodeIgniter model, just like we did in this, but it happens automatically in this case. So I'll say parent construct, and what we're going to do is look at the user model, and we can actually take all of this and just cut it out. Okay, and in the CRUD model, we're going to paste it in here. So paste. And now we have more of a flexible CRUD model. It's not done yet, but we'll be able to work with it. Now for the user model, what this is going to do, it's going to extend the CRUD model. So instead of extending CI model, we'll say CRUD model. And what we're going to have to do is actually load this file. And there's not really an official autoloader in CodeIgniter. There's this autoload, but it doesn't have the regular PHP autoloader. So I suppose what I'm going to do is perhaps place it in the config and call it good. So I'll just put it up here and I'll say require apppath.models, and apppath is a constant that refers to the application folder, and I'll put a slash here, and the name was CRUD model.php. Okay, so this should load it, and when the user model is called, we want to do a parent construct also. So let me just do a public. Actually, I could just copy the code out of the CRUD model. No reason to retype that like that. Okay. And what I'm going to do before I do anything is load the page. And we have this CI model is not found from the CRUD model. And why is this? This is because the CRUD model is getting it required, but this file actually needs the CodeIgniter model. So we're going to do something a little different, and I'm going to go to config, and I'm just going to throw in a regular auto load. So I'll say function auto load class, and this is just a standard PHP autoloader, and I'll say class equals string to lower class, so that we're not complicated with uppercase letters or anything, because when this auto loads, it'll probably pass in as how we typed it, CRUD model, but our file name is actually CRUD model, so we want it to be lowercase. So class, and I'll just say if class equals CRUD model, require once, pretty much almost this whole line here actually, like this. And instead of this, we can just put the $class with a period. And instead of .php, we can just do the constant ext, and you can see it's .php there. So I'll go ahead and refresh. Let's hope that works. And there it goes. There's no error now. So we have a custom little thing in place. I'm just going to copy this chunk here, paste it right here, and I'll say custom autoloader. Now, the reason I put a special case in here and just don't auto-load everything is because CodeIgniter will then just start loading a bunch of crap, and we'll have a lot of problems. So that covers it for auto-loading that guy. I'll close out my config. And let's take a look at this. When we want a class, we want it to be flexible in the sense that it's not only going to be tied to users. So let me shrink these folders so we're all not confused. So here's our CRUD model, and our get parameter we want to be a lot better for starters. So let's make some usage cases. We have some usage cases right here, and let's also do a custom one. We want this to be very versatile. So for the example here, I'll just use user model, even though we can use this with any class model we want. And I'll say get array any param. And let's put this to life. I think that'll be good. That will get all. So let's go ahead and put this to work. I can get rid of this user ID here. Now by default we'll have an ID. You see a single use would be an ID, and by default we'll just make it null because it'll be optional. What else do we have? Let's do an order by equals null. Okay. So by this, what we need to do is first detect if it's empty. That way we'll get all. Let me move this up actually, because all will probably be more like the first one. So let's do switch, or how about let's just do an if statement. If ID equals null, we'll do something there. Else if is numeric ID, else if is array ID. Whoops. Okay. So we have these statements. The thing is, to make it look a little cleaner, we could actually get rid of these else ifs and just say if, because there's only one condition they could meet, meaning null can't be numeric, numeric can't be array, and so forth. The reason we did is numeric rather than is digit is because on accident someone might accidentally type in 2 like that, and they're well meaning to get the user ID 2, so we're going to stick with is numeric. So if the ID is null, we're just going to fetch it all. So I'll say this db get, and that's going to get everything. So it's not going to need a where statement. I'll just comment out some of these. If it's an array, this one I'll have to go through you slowly with, and we'll say this db where, and I'll just move these over. Now before I get any further, we need something to globally set what table we're talking about, and to do so I'll go to the top. Let me get my demarcation line so it's not so sloppy, and I'll say protected, and that just means a child class can access this variable. So the user model, since it extends CRUD model, will be able to access this variable. I'll say table equals null, protected, primary key equals null. Okay, and what we're going to do is copy this and paste it right here, and we'll just say the table will be user, and this will be user ID. So this data will actually be passed into the CRUD model. If we had a restaurant model, we would put probably restaurant and restaurant ID, and restaurant model would extend the CRUD model. Okay, so I'll go down and let's see what we have. If ID is null, we just want to get everything. So I'll call this Q equals, and that'll be stand for our query. If is numeric, then I want to say where this primary key is ID. Okay. If it's in an array, we're going to loop through it. So I'll say for each ID as key value. And notice I put an underscore before them. If you don't like to do that, you don't have to. And I'll say this DB where key value. Okay. And what that would do is it, like, let's say this was age and 32. Now, I'm sorry if this is a little hard to read because it's in gray, but if someone passed in an array, they could have multiple values. Gender is male, like that. And this would say where age is 32, where gender is male. It will only get things to match that criteria. Okay, so it's all about flexibility. This right here where it's null, I could actually get rid of this because we'll use this at the bottom. Okay, if it's null, we're not really doing any where statement, so I'll just say db get. I can drop this. Okay, and now we have all this stuff here. So what I'm going to try to do is get a few parameters. If I go to my controllers and my test, this looks pretty dirty, but we'll try it anyways. Let me get rid of the squiggly, and I'll say this user model get. I'll call this result equals user model get, and I'm just going to print R of result so I can get some info dumped out, and the pre-tag will make it readable. Okay, so back to this, and I'll just go to /test, and it says no tables used. It looks like we forgot something in our get. No big deal, easy fix. In the CRUD model, I have to do this table. Okay, and let me try once more. And here we have all the goods. So that's a full get, and that works fine. We can see this user ID is 16. So let's try to get an integer. Let me close that window out. So in the test, I'll just say get 16. Whoops. Okay, and refresh. And there's 16. And remember how we did the is numeric? I'm also gonna put quotes around here and refresh, and it still works. So it's kind of like a safety net for just 16. Now what we're gonna do is pass in a custom array. And you see I'm typing the old array types. I'm back and forth sometimes. So let's try this. Let's try user ID is 16. Make sure that gets it in the first place, so it did. Let's try login is Jesse. Login is going to be Jesse. And refresh, and it's still getting it. So you might be saying, what is really happening here? I want to know what queries I'm getting. And this is going to help you a lot. We're going to enable the profiler. I'll say this output enable profiler true. And hopefully I typed all that right. So go ahead and refresh your page and refresh again. Looks like nothing happened, so let me just double check. This output enable profiler true. Let me put this guy above here, right there. This output enable profiler true. And refresh. Well, it's misbehaving, so let me try to put it under the index method. And refresh. There it goes. Doesn't want to work in the construct. So if I scroll down a little bit, a little more, here we go. You see it built this query. Select from user where user ID is 16 and login equals Jesse. And that's pretty easy to type. And all we had to do was just one line of code like that. Let me also throw this your way also. What if we wanted to select every user where the login was not Jesse? We could use CodeIgniter standard stuff and say not equals. Now notice there's a space here. So login does not equal Jesse. And let's see what happens. Refresh. And we get the users that don't equal Jesse. So the get class, it's supposed to be really simple, and hopefully that is. With that said, that'll cover the get methods, and we'll do a little bit more further on. Welcome back, guys. In this video we're going to cover a couple other sections for the CRUD model, and this will be kind of fun. Let's start with the insert. So when I look at this, what I want is insert is just straight up inserting data, and this is really easy to do. All we have to do is just make this more flexible. So I'll change this to this underscore data, or sorry, table. Okay. And we're going to return an insert ID. So we were pretty good with this one, and it just works like this. I'll actually copy this guy right here. So in our test controller, let's go ahead and comment these guys out. All I did was hold Control and press / to comment that, and I'll say this user model insert login Jethro, and I'll say result equals that. I'm going to change his name to Marcus. And every time you insert something, usually what you want back is the insert ID. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh, and it gives us 18. Okay. Now I'll go back. I'll just comment him out and uncomment this, and I'll just do a get of every user so we can see what we got, make sure he's in there. Refresh. And down a little ways, there's Marcus. He has no email or password. That's okay. We didn't make anything. So that's pretty much it for insert. That one's quite easy. Another one that's fairly easy will be delete. Update we'll come back to. So to delete, first of all, we're going to always delete from the table this underscore table. And we can actually get rid of that. So there's a couple things we want to think about here. Usage, whoops. The usage of this, we're also going to want to say this, whatever the model name is, delete a where statement. So we want to say, like, let's say array name is Marcus. If I didn't know his ID, or I wanted to delete everybody with the name Marcus, we just want that option. So with this, this is actually going to be a parameter, just we'll call it ID. And for this, we'll say if is array ID. And let's also do a if is numeric ID. And for this, we'll just do the this db where this primary key equals ID. And for this guy down here, if it is an array, we're just going to copy the for each loop we did for this guy right here, and go back down. Okay, so ID as key value in all those where statements. Okay, now the difference with ID, we need to be serious about this, is that if it's not numeric and it's not an array, it could delete the whole table, and that's terrible. So I want to put an else if here. Okay, and then I'm going to put an else one line below, and for this I'm just going to die and say you must pass a parameter to the delete method. Okay, and the reason for this is because we never want to delete everything in our table unless we're crazy, and it would be really easy to accidentally type delete without a parameter there, and in almost every case you just aren't going to want to do that. So we'll do this delete from table. So let's try it out. Let me comment that guy out, and I'll say result equals this user model delete. Now, if you don't understand how the user model is interacting with the CRUD model, let me just reiterate for you. The user model is extending the CRUD model. So it's actually going to this guy, and it inherits all of these properties as long as they're public or protected. Okay, if they're private, you can't touch them. And then the CRUD model extends the CodeIgniter model. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. You play around with it a little bit, I think it will. And for delete, hopefully this fails. So I'll go ahead and refresh. And missing one argument for delete. Well, that's good. We'll leave those errors up because you should always pass an argument. So let's try to delete user ID 18. And I'll go ahead and refresh. And it won, so it's a success. And let's look at our code. Delete from user where user ID equals 18. Beautiful. Okay. And then let's test out the array one. Let's insert a couple of these guys. I'll just make a couple lines like this. Refresh. Refresh. Okay. And let's actually do a get. Let's see what we have. So here's our data. We got all these Marcus 2, Marcus 3, Marcus 4. Okay. So we're going to do an array and see what happens. Make sure it works. So I'll uncomment this line and I'll delete array where login equals Marcus 2. Okay. Now before I refresh the page, let's check something. We have Marcus 2 and we have Marcus 2. And notice this guy has ID 22 and he has ID 19. So this is something you'd want to be careful with. I'll go ahead and refresh. And it says 2, so 2 of them were deleted. Okay, I will now comment this guy out and then comment out the delete, and let's see what we have now. Refresh, refresh. Oh, I commented out the wrong thing, sorry. Result equals get. Refresh, and we should be missing all the Marcus 2s. Yep. Well, it looks like we have one there. Oh, it's because we were refreshing the page when we created Marcus 2. I'm sorry. That's why it happened. I accidentally uncommented this line, refreshed the page, and it kept creating Marcus 2. So that'll cover it for the insert and delete. Next, we'll check out the update. All right, let's take a look at updating. It's kind of fun to know that we're building something we can reuse hundreds of times over. So let's go to the update. So this one's a little bit different than what we've been doing. Basically, what we want to be able to do is a couple of things. Number one is we want to be able to say this user model update. Let's say login is going to be TED. Where some custom parameter like date created is 0, something like that, if we had a different password field. Okay, so we want more options for this. What else do we need? Let's take a look. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is for the first parameter, the data, we're going to just call this, new data. And for the second parameter, this is going to be our where. Okay, so we already know that we want to update, so we have this good stuff here. We'll say this table, and this will be new data. Okay. So with the where statement, let's see, we're going to want to detect if it's numeric again. So if is numeric of where, let me Control Z back, where. I will tell you I'm hitting escape a lot to get rid of those pop-ups if that helps you. I'll say if is array of where. Okay, so let's just cut up one of those wheres, cut up one of those wheres, and for this, what we're going to assume is if they pass just an integer, it's just going to reflect the primary key set in the sub model. In this case, the primary key is user ID. I like to keep them consistent and very, very simple. So we'll say where this primary key equals where. Okay. For this guy, it looks like we will be able to do a bunch of stuff. It'll just be a copy of the where statement. Let's see this little for each guy here. So let me just, this is the same for each we've used in all the other ones, except we're going to change this to where key value. Okay. Okay. Now I'm not 100% certain on how this will function, so let's give it a test run. I'm actually going to open Heidi SQL so we can take a look at a couple things. And let me go to junior-user data. Okay, my window's a little big. So I want to update ID 26 right here. And I just want to set his password to something. So under test, I'm just going to say result equals this user model update, and I'll say array password equals piggy. And where will that happen? What was it, 28 or 26? 26. Okay, like this. And this should return the affected rows, so I'll go ahead and refresh, and it says 1. So I'll just double check the database and press F5, and it says piggy. So that's good so far. We want to be kind of careful with this, so let's update a couple more records, and let's just change this to dog. Let's change login to hen, just to try it out, make sure it can update multiple values. We got a result of 1 once we refresh the page. I'll refresh and it changes to hen and dog. So that is working quite well. One thing is, if they do not pass in an ID or something here, we're going to have a serious problem. Just like the delete, it'll update every single table, and I really think we want to prevent that. So again, like the delete, in our last video, you see how we had this else if and else. We're going to kind of do the same thing pretty much, so that we don't kick ourselves in the foot later. And we'll just say you must pass a second parameter to the update method. Okay, so this way, if they pass in data and they forget to put something there, or you forget to do that, we refresh, and we don't want it to update every table with the new data. That'd be a nightmare. Okay, so our next thing is our other where statement. So we can have another array. So I'll say array, and I apologize for using these old school arrays, but it's good to change it up and kind of get in the habit of backwards compatibility here and there. So what I'm looking for is in the database, I want to update where login equals Marcus3. You see we have Marcus3 here twice, so I want my where statement to target that, Marcus3. And let's see what happens. I'll go ahead and refresh, and it says 2. I'll go here and refresh. There it goes, hen, hen, dog, dog. Excellent. Looks like it's working pretty smoothly. And I'm not going to leave you here. We're going to make it a little bit more fun. We're going to add an insert update feature. So that we're not bored to death, this might actually come in handy sometime. Let's say public function insert update. Okay. And the way this is going to work is if the record exists, it's going to update. If it does not exist, it's going to insert. So we'll say usage insert update, and this will have pretty much just data for the first one, so let's just call this data, and let's say name is Ted, and then we can have a key, so let's say 12. So it's first going to check if that record exists, otherwise it will insert it if it does not. So with that, let's just try it with that. So we'll say ID. The first thing we have to do is a query, so I'll say this DB select this primary key. Whoops. We only need to select the primary key because it's we don't need to select every field, just to save a little bit of memory. And I'll say q numRows, q equals that, and okay. So this is our query, except I do not have a get. So let me do a, that is not right. Q equals this db get this table. Okay, and we're typing abstractly where things are very fillable. So sometimes it takes a minute to pause and look at what we're doing. This database select just a primary key, get from that table, and we're going to need a where statement. So this db where this, whoops, primary key equals ID. Okay. Insert update with the ID. Okay. Let me just return result, and I want to test this out before we get crazy. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and comment this stuff out, and we'll say result equals this user model, insert update, and in here this will be our array. We'll say login is going to be Donnie, and down here I'll just say 23. I don't think there's an ID for that, so refresh, and it does look like there's an ID. Interesting. Refresh, 23. Yes, there is an ID. So we know that does behave correctly. I want to be real careful here because I want to make sure that an ID is always passed. So I'm going to say if not ID, and we'll just copy our die statement and say you must pass a second parameter to the insert update method. Now you can name these die statements however you like. I'm just trying to cover our bases, so I'll just say false is default. It should never be false, but if it is, that's bad. Okay. So what we're going to do, we're going to say if result equals 0, it's going to be an update. Okay. Else it's going to be an insert. So heavens, I believe we could just call our current methods that we created. We could say this insert or this update. So I'll say this insert, and the data will just be data, and I will return that. For the update, I'll say return this update data ID, like that. Okay. And when we're returning stuff, we actually don't need to have an else statement here, like so, because once this returns data, it finishes execution. So let's see what happens. I'll go ahead and refresh, and it says 27, and that would be an update. So I'll go ahead and refresh. Oh, I'm sorry, that would be an insert. That's a new primary key. Let's try that again. With 23, this should have updated it, not create a new record. So, whoops, I accidentally closed that. So let's see, echo update, echo insert. and let's say echo result. See what's going on here. Let me reopen test for us. And insert update, login as Donnie, ID is 23, we know it exists. And it's doing an insert, and it says 1 because I got my numbers wrong. So if result equals 0, we do an insert. Sorry guys. Sometimes your brain just won't behave. Okay, let's try that once more. Refresh. Gives us 1, which should be true. So ID number 23, I'll refresh and it says Donnie. Good. I can try to change that up again to, let's say, Don2. Donnie2, sorry. Refresh, we get true. And let's open this up. Refresh, there's Donnie2. Beautiful. Okay, so now we have an insert update that will think for us. And that'll be it for the CRUD model for now, unless we stumble upon some serious errors. I will make this code available in the downloads too. Now that we have our CRUD model in place, and with our nice little user model here, what we can do is go ahead and create 2 more models. So I'll copy all this in the user model, and I'll say new PHP file, and I'll call this to-do model. I'll just select all and paste. I'll change this to to-do. I'll change the table to to-do, and the primary key to to-do ID. And this extends the CRUD model, so now we only typed our code once inside the CRUD model. Very, very useful. Okay, and we'll do the same thing for the notes model. And I'm going to actually have to double check. I believe it's not plural. It shouldn't be. Good. It's called note. So I'll call this note model. Paste. Note model. Note. And you can do this for any class you want. Okay. So now we have those. Beautiful. Just beautiful. So I'll close out all of these, and let's head over to the API. Let's do a little refactoring and see what's going on. So we can scroll down a little ways to the login. The user model, we didn't have to change anything because it already used kind of a CRUD interface, and we didn't change it so much that it broke it. And that's really cool. So let's go down a little more. We're loading the user model a lot. Here, and maybe more. What we could do is just get rid of that and just take this guy up here, and in the construct, whoops, I'll say this load model user model. Okay, and I'll go down a little bit. Let's make sure we're not loading this anywhere else. So let's see where we can. Okay, it's only one place. You might not have to do that, but I kind of prefer it that way. It's just a little file. So if we go down a little ways, we get to do, and here's where the fun starts. So we want to load our to-do model. This load model, to-do model, and I'll go ahead and say this to-do model get. And inside of here, we're going to get where, pretty much this exact same stuff. Okay. And look at that. We don't need all this stuff here. We can get rid of this. I'll change this to result. I can get rid of these 2 lines. Sorry for this highlighting. It's a little annoying sometimes where it's highlighting all these this words. Okay. Let's see. So if the ID is not null, select that. Okay, so that's selecting an individual ID. So for this one, we'll say result equals this to-do model get. Actually, we could just pass in a pretty much a short version of that, like so. Okay, and I like to do things one at a time and make sure it works. Now, I hope I didn't delete those, so let me just type in test, and refresh. and there's a little bit of a hiccup with it. So let's see what's going on. To do model get, and we're returning the result. And let me look in the database at the to do, where user ID is probably going to be 1. Okay, so I suppose my first rule of business is to say, hey, echo this user ID 1. And I'll open up the console and go to network, refresh. I'm going to load up this little XHR tab, get to do, and we have 1. So that is good. Undefined property to do model, line number 97. Looks like I did something wrong. I need to put this outside of this statement, like this. Whoops. That should not be in that conditional. You know, just to make my life easier, I'm going to put this up at the top also. And I'm going to do the same for notes. Note. Because that's going to get annoying. So going back down, just to make sure, to do model, and go ahead and refresh. And here's all my goodies. Okay. Next business of refactoring. This DB insert. This will actually need to be this to do model insert. Get rid of that guy. Okay. Form output. Okay, so we just changed the insert here. So if there is a result, it looks like this is trying to get the query ID, and that's in our result. Because every time we insert, right here when we're doing an insert, remember that it returns the ID. It's just so handy. Okay, so let's make sure that works. I'll refresh the page and write 1, 2, 3. And let's check the network. The network won't lie. Cool. 35. And refresh, and there it is. Okay. Next, update to do. So we'll say this to do model update, and we have our data, and this looks like it's just going to be a complete state. So I'll just say put the little brackets here and there, little array, so complete will be complete. Oh, sorry. Okay, and the where will be comma to do ID. I can delete this, delete the affected rows, and our update gives us the result. Very simple. And that's it for that one. To delete a to do, I'll say this to do model delete. And here's our where statement. And let's put a result on here. Result equals that. And we'll just say if result, meaning it's not 0, return false. Okay, so let's make sure these work. Update, refresh the page. They're still in that state. Refresh, and let's try to delete, and refresh, delete, refresh. Looks good. Let's go down to get notes, create note, update note, delete note. And these ones are actually going to be pretty close to the to-dos. But what I wanted to do first is just kind of refactor these and get them ready. I'm going to comment out the test to the squiggly once again. And this is going to wrap up the CRUD model series.